Hello, this is Jasmine, and welcome to another Sketchbook Sunday and another Cattober prompt. So this prompt is Spell. It's one of the older prompts, and I had a lot of fun with it, but also a bit of trouble. As you know, I'm using these prompts to kind of learn gouache, and this one was a bit of a struggle, but we'll get into that a little more when I get to those parts. I also want to mention that for this video, I'm trying a new filming process. Well, not a new filming process, but a new editing process. And if you guys want to let me know how you feel about it, I would really appreciate that. So basically with this one, what I did was I have a whole bunch of real-time clips with very little time lapse. And I enjoy watching people paint in real time. Honestly, I would enjoy very long, completely real-time painting. I like watching recorded live streams and stuff like that. But I know that for YouTube, it should be a bit shorter. So this is only about 15 minutes. So I have to jump around quite a bit because the painting did take me hours, not minutes. But I think it's pretty enjoyable to watch all the little real-time clips. Just let me know how you feel and if it's too jarring or if you would prefer to see like the whole process with all time lapse to make it short enough. But about the prompt itself, the prompt was spell, and I honestly had this idea for like a cat coming out of a spell book, like a misty cat form or something. But the thing is, later on in the prompt series, there is the prompt book or spell book, I'm not sure which, but I felt like the book had to be a little less of the piece for this one. But I still really wanted to do this book with a spell coming out of it, and the kitty is kind of attacking all of the bubbles and stuff that come out of the spell book. And this is the first prompt that I used my liquid frisket, so it's like a masking fluid that I put on and I let it dry. I did a little bit of testing before I did this to make sure that it would not tear up the page, because that would be a nightmare. Always test your masking fluid. Even if you have already tested it on other pieces, make sure you test it on the paper that you're working with. And it was a lot of fun. My masking fluid is really old, so I know it never smells good, but it like smelled so bad, and like inside the little jar, it was mostly all like a big ball of latex and then some liquid around it. It was it was really weird and pretty gross, but also kind of fun. I'm going in with my usual technique of putting down layers. I put down a lighter wash, like watercolor style, in the background, and now I'm going in with a more opaque layer. To make it more opaque, with dried gouache, I just mix in some white, and I know it doesn't look like it because this is quite a dark color, but I mix in a little bit of white and then a lot of the dark color to make sure I've got kind of a desaturated, very dark but also very opaque color to work with. So far everything was going down really well, but as I work on the book, you will see that I had some struggles. In the end, I really like the way it turned out, but do not get attached to the way the book looks in the very beginning, because it ends up looking not quite a lot like different as in structurally, but for one, the writing that I do on the pages, that gets covered up and redone like 3 different times, I think, which in the long run, it doesn't really bother me because it's supposed to look like this old magical spell tome, and redoing the writing over and over again gives it kind of this like grimy and cluttered sort of look, because you can see a little bit of the previous layers showing through. But honestly, one of my favorite parts of this whole painting is the background. I really like that solid dark brown that I went in with, and then went over it with a really intense reddish brown, almost a burnt sienna kind of color, lightened that up a little bit, and I went with a lot of texture. Like I went in and added a lot of just brush strokes all over the place to give it, I don't know, almost an old like oil painting kind of feel to the background. There's nothing there, there's no detail, there's no silhouettes of any tables or anything like that. It's just this really nice gradient. The kitty itself was also really fun. I went with kind of a gray tabby Maine Coon kind of kitty, and the only thing I wish with the cat is that maybe I had made it a little bit thicker or like bigger, fluffier, just take up a little bit more of this space, but I am happy with how it turned out as far as the anatomy goes and as far as like the pose and the expression. The face was a little bit difficult. I struggled with the eye. I'm still not sure I'm entirely happy with the eye, but I do really like the piece, so I'm not too worried about that. I have so much fun putting in all the little tiny details. I love stripy tabby patterns, and I love going in and making all the like little dots for the whiskers and stuff. I feel like this is my favorite part of the painting process, is when I start to put in the little tiny details and everything just really starts to come together and look like a finished illustration as opposed to just a bunch of blobs of color. It's also one of the scariest parts because you can start putting in details and be like, oh no, I liked it better before when it was like sketchier. But most of the time, if you just push through, it ends up looking far better that way, because even though your mind may have appreciated the sketchiness before, I think there's always something to be said for a more polished illustration, and in my personal experience, I'm always more proud of those pieces because, I mean, I may really like a sketch, but I'm more proud of a full finished illustration that I have refined and put a lot of detail into. That being said, you might not feel that way, and you might prefer my sketchy stuff, and you might prefer your own sketchy stuff, and you know, art is very subjective, but I like to finish things up and add all those tiny details even if I risk ruining it. I'm absolutely loving working with gouache now, so I feel like I have really accomplished a lot with this challenge, because I first went into this challenge and the most recent gouache I had done, I was just not into, and I wasn't enjoying the medium. But now, after working with it this way, especially after working with it in a dried palette where I have to go in with layers of thinner gouache first, I'm just finding that this is how I've really hit my stride. I like the layers and I like working them up, and I'm feeling a lot more comfortable and a lot more confident in the medium. And of course I am. That's how it works. You practice and you get better and you get more confident. So I really recommend doing something like this, not necessarily a daily challenge. I myself have already fallen off of the daily challenge bit. I haven't worked on a Cattober piece in a while, but to challenge yourself to work in a medium frequently and like really do intentional practice. Thumbnail out some pieces, go in with a plan, and really practice with that medium and only with that medium until you're happy and more comfortable with it. And I just think that that's a really great way to go about tackling a medium that scares you or that you just do not feel confident in. And I know that that's all just like general knowledge, but I felt like it was it's a really important thing to go over and over again, especially if some of my viewers are newer artists, young or old. If you're not used to drawing, then it's a good tip. Pick a medium and really stick to it and practice. Now this part of the art is where I was struggling a lot because, like I said, I like to layer up my gouache, layer after layer, but with the white here of the book, it kept reactivating and I struggled so much with that. In the end, I like it. I just kept going. I let it dry completely. Make sure when you're using a medium like gouache or watercolor and even acrylic, it's very important that if you want to put another layer on top, especially to fix something that went wrong, make sure that the layer underneath is 100% dry, because if it is not, in the case of watercolor and gouache, it will reactivate and you can't do things like I do here where I go in with a wash over the top to just change the tone. With watercolor and gouache, it does still make it a little bit more blurry, as you can see in the book, but that's okay because I'm hoping to give it like a little bit of a faded into shadow look. And you have to be really, really quick and sure of your movements when you are going over with a wash. Like I said, the one page of my book got kind of messed up, but I go over it with more layers. That's the beauty of things that can layer up. And you don't have to worry about this with acrylic wash. You still want it to be dry, but you don't have to worry about the layers reactivating if they are completely dry. One of the problems with acrylic, if you don't wait for the layer underneath to be 100% dry, is that it will actually lift up in like a gross, clumpy way that leaves texture, and if you don't want texture there on your painting, it's just really bad. So honestly, even though it's not something that would normally be lumped in with things like watercolor and gouache, I want to say that if you're using acrylics, it's even more important that your layers underneath are completely dry so that they don't get like gummy and really gross. We're coming up to the end of the video. I'm sorry if I rambled a bit. This was a little bit of a longer video than I have been putting out lately, and I didn't really have any specific topic in mind, but I am now taking off the liquid frisket, the masking fluid, and this is always so satisfying, and I find it the most satisfying where it is on the book, because the gouache on the book was a little more solid over the top, so it looks like these bubbles are coming out of absolutely nowhere, whereas in the background you could kind of see where the masking fluid was. But I'm not just going to leave these circles white, I'm going to throw in some color. I wasn't sure exactly what I wanted to do at first. I was kind of thinking of having them all just be yellow and maybe like blurring the edges a bit, but then I was like, what if they're kind of like bubble-like? I ended up going somewhere in between where they've got this harsh white outline and just this solid color on the inside, and I tried to make it look like they were actually coming out of the page of the book. And I also went in with several different colors. I didn't want this piece to be too cluttered, so I stuck with just yellow, green, and blue for the bubbles. And I kept them very saturated because I wanted this nice little bright, magical pop of color on top of an otherwise kind of old and weathered feeling looking book, and very dark and mysterious background, and a fairly monochrome cat, and then we've got all this like bright colors. And I went ahead and went in with my white gel pen too to add a little more lines and a bunch of magical sparkles. But that is it for this one. I am Jasmine Zelmer on all of my socials and jasminezelmer.com, and thanks for stopping by.